Welcome to Interior Analysis. I'm Evan Westman.
I am Jelani Kelly.
And today we're talking about Spotlight, the 2015 Best Picture winner. And actually, this is something that I think deserved to win Best Picture, which is, I don't want to say rare, but rarer than I'd like it to be. And just before we go further, trigger warning, just for content, if you've seen this, you probably know why. Probably also a language warning, which shouldn't be the thing that turns you away, I think. But basically, don't listen to this with kids in earshot. If you haven't seen this, I don't know why you'd be listening anyway, but warning for that. So, this was your first time watching it. Any initial reactions?
Well, you knew it wasn't my genre, but...
I did. I knew it might be not the most fun thing for you.
Yeah.
It's not the most fun thing for anyone, but, it's very much not a you movie.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was important, what it brought to light. Because even I learned some things from it. I thought it was a few bad apples, and we'll get into that later. But, I didn't realize it was that freaking many priests doing that. I've heard all the priest jokes and stuff like that about them doing what they were doing. I didn't realize it was as big as it was, or is probably still going on. But other than it, not really being my speed, I was fine with it. Like I said, the subject matter is important. It's just one of those things I feel like people need to be educated on, whether it's funner to watch or not. So I'm glad you made me watch it, because, like I said, I learned a few things from it. Initial reactions, not too deep. I just had a few questions and just notes. We're going to immediately get into what was more my speed from the movies we have seen on the podcast. It's crazy how many actors that were in Marvel movies that are a part of this main cast.
It really is. And I looked into it. There's even more than I thought.
Oh, God.
Go ahead.
So we got Mark Ruffalo, otherwise known as Hulk Guy. Rachel McAdams, who was Doctor Strange's GF in his movie. Michael Keaton, also known as the best Spider-Man villain so far that we've seen on screen, the Vulture.
And Batman. I know that's not Marvel,
and
but
Batman.
Also Batman.
He was Batman or something like that.
I know you don't like Batman, but
yeah,
people know him for that more than the Vulture.
He was he's still in the argument, running for best Batman currently with Bale, and I don't hear Affleck as much, but I know some people are gunning for him. But that's not what this is about. Tony Stark's father, I don't know the actor's name.
John Slattery.
I thought if you said it, I was going to remember that name, but I don't.
I always forget him too.
He's normally always somebody's father. I'm surprised he wasn't a father in this.
Yeah. He's always, vaguely unhelpful, I feel like, everything I've seen John Slattery, and he's not, a bad guy, but he's,
He's also kind of an ass.
He is.
He's typecast as an asshole.
But, not a bad guy and not, a huge asshole, just kind of, that...
Self-centered.
He's just, the boss that, gets on you to do work, basically, in everything that he's in.
Yeah. Liv Schreiber. He was Sabretooth in X-Men Origins Wolverine. If you saw that movie, bless your heart for watching it. I loved it as a kid because Wolverine was my favorite hero growing up, so it was just cool to see Wolverine in another action movie. I hated the Wolverine. I'd rather watch, this might sound blasphemous, I'd rather watch X-Men Origins over the Wolverine. I can't stand when he loses his regeneration powers. But still, that's not what this podcast is about. I could go on and on about all types of...
Was that the end of your list? Because there's actually two more.
Oh, who are the other two?
We also have Stanley Tucci is the scientist that made Captain America Captain America.
Oh!
And then...
They really do him justice with makeup. I can never tell when it's him. If I didn't realize he was in the credits, I wouldn't have realized it was Stanley Tucci.
And... yeah, when I saw you give that note, I was like, I should look that up, because Stanley Tucci's definitely been in a Marvel movie. But I just, I didn't think that was who he was, but that is him.
Yep.
And then also, Brian Darcy James is the actor. He plays Matt Carroll, the journalist with the mustache that doesn't get a lot of attention. He apparently is the president in Dark Phoenix, which came out after this. But that pretty much... Oh, and also you have Dr. Manhattan, Billy Crudup, as the lawyer. So, like, literally every big character in this is in a superhero movie. It's quite a team up.
Yeah. Yeah. They didn't do any superpower things, in case you guys were wondering. But let's move on to my next note. I know the actors have been in, like, plenty of other movies, but it's kind of weird. It was kind of weird to sit there and listen to them do Bostonian accents, or some of them do Bostonian accents, and the rest of them kind of just do normal American accents. And everyone was, like, talking super fast, like, really fast. Mainly Mark Ruffalo and Rachel McAdams. I was like, why? I know they're journalists, but why the hell are they talking so fast? It's a little weird.
I mean, they have a lot of dialogue to get through. Like, the script is 140 pages, which, for this kind of movie, like, I think the runtime is 210, which is about as long as I think they could have made it. Because, like, even, like, 10 more minutes, I think, would have been a lot for people.
I just assumed it was part of the journalist cliche about, like, talking fast and a lot to inform somebody on something and then ask them a question after. Like, it was weird.
It's probably that too. I mean, these people are all portraying real people, so I don't know how accurate their portrayals are. I've seen a couple interviews with some people.
Mark was the most quirky guy. Like, I wonder whoever he was Mike, whoever he was portraying was like that in real life, because he was by far the most non-stoic character or person.
Yeah, he and Rachel McAdams actually both got nominated for their performances. They didn't win. I think that's pretty fair. Like, I wouldn't have given them wins, but they did well. They were both for supporting, so I don't remember. I want to say it was like Mark Rylance, and then I don't know who won for Best Actress. Leo won for Best Lead Actor, but they weren't up against him.
Was it The Revenant? Was that his year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, while we're on the Oscars, too, like, this had pretty good competition, and I think still deserved it. Like, this went up against Inside Out and Ex Machina for Best Original Screenplay.
Hey, we just watched that. Go watch that episode, too.
Yeah, and like, both of those, I think, are phenomenal scripts that other years would have absolutely deserved to win. I think this, just in terms of technical writing, it's definitely more of an Oscars movie. Like, I would have been surprised to see Ex Machina, as good as it is. It's not really an Academy movie. And then, like, this was up against some pretty good Best Picture nominees, like Mad Max Fury Road, which also would have been a surprising win, but really good movie. And then The Big Short was a big contender against this. I think The Martian was up that year, too. It was, like, a fairly solid year, but I remember when I saw this, I think I saw it after it won Best Picture, but I was like, yeah, well-deserved, which I don't always say.
Back to the actors. It just felt forced somehow. Not everybody was entirely believable. Like, Ruffalo in his role. Like, I could kind of see him like that, like, maybe towards the end for some reason. Like, when he had that, I wouldn't say exciting, but, like, dramatic, climactic moment was when he was, like, arguing with his head about pushing the story out now rather than waiting for the other newspaper to F it up, the Herald to F it up. But, like, after seeing him in only one role, which was the Hulk, it was weird to see him, like, talk fast, bobbing his head every 3 seconds and all of that.
He does do that a lot.
Turning around sharply, like, ready, like he's trying to crack his neck or something. It was weird. But at the same time, paradoxically, the most believable, I'd say, was Liv Schreiber. And I said maybe because I've seen him in less movies / media. Like, I only saw him as Sabretooth in the bad X-Men movie. Well, there's a lot of those, but in that bad Wolverine one, well, there's a couple of those too. In X-Men Origins Wolverine, And I said maybe because I've seen him in less movies slash media, but I've also seen Mark Ruffalo in the exact same amount of roles. So I don't know. I don't know, man. Maybe because
Yeah.
his character was more like down to earth and chill as opposed to quirky, like Mark
Yeah.
Ruffalo's
Well,
character.
I watched some interviews with the guy that he's portraying, Marty Baron, and like it's a pretty perfect impression. Like he doesn't look exactly like the guy does, but like the vibe is spot on for how he plays this.
Mm, cool. So, hearing the stories, let's get a little more serious now. Hearing the stories, I'm glad they didn't sugarcoat any of them. I guess it was to bring spotlight to the situations, which is the name of the movie and the name of the team. So that was good that they didn't shy away from any of the victims' gruesome details. Didn't expect 9/11 to be in this. Didn't consider when this movie or when the events from this movie happened. So that was a shocker.
Yeah, I really liked the way they used 9/11 in this, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but like it is used to a very good dramatic purpose. Like we'll get into it a little later, but like it has a real significance on it, and it's like it's just such a testament to like this is still happening. And also like I mean, I don't remember 9/11, but everyone like more than a
It's like
couple years older than us.
3.5.
Yeah, so like we're a little young to remember 9/11, but even we know how big it is. Like of course everything would stop there, but it doesn't make the story any less important to tell. So I really liked how they used it.
I had a couple questions like why not a normal documentary over a movie? Did they really want the Oscar? I doubt it. There had to be some reason why it wasn't a documentary. Maybe they thought if it was a movie form, more people would watch it.
I think that's a valid point. I have a couple possible answers. One, there may be a documentary about this. I don't really know.
Oh,
I haven't looked for one. There may not be also. I would say there's maybe two possible reasons why. One is this got a lot more attention than I think a documentary would have.
yes.
If it gets awards attention, like people at least are like, oh, maybe that's worth seeing. And, it stays out in theaters a little longer when it's up for awards, which, that I think helped. Also, just because of the nature of the investigation, like there's definitely no footage, I would think, of this actually happening.
Mm.
And also think about like who could they interview? They probably can't interview victims. They probably aren't going to get that many priests to interview.
You also got to think of the quality of the footage as well. Like this would have, if it was a documentary, it probably would have been out sooner. No.
Yeah, that's probably true too. I mean, this got big media coverage immediately after, so I would guess that like if there were going to be a documentary, it would have been made like just after this, like as the story was being exposed, like throughout 2002.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't know what kind of restrictions that would place on it, but I would guess that if they did a documentary, it would probably just be interviews with the same characters we see in this. And maybe that's why we really stick with them, because maybe even the people who made this couldn't necessarily get testimonies from other people involved.
Yeah.
It's a possibility. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
Would you have preferred a documentary,
No.
you think?
No. Only time I've ever watched documentary is for school.
Yeah, I'm pretty much the same with that.
I didn't get the part where they didn't, like, the reason why they didn't run the story years ago. Like, they had the information there ready to go, and they didn't run it before. It was like that intense scene where it's like, why didn't we run the story before? And then somebody gave a one sentence answer. I was like, oh, I guess they just answered it. But it's 9 a.m. and I'm not willing to go back for that. I'm tired.
Well, I think the whole point of the movie in a lot of ways is that there isn't really a good answer to that question. Not the whole point, but we'll get into that later, but there really is not a good answer to your question there. Like
Laziness.
yeah, or your kind
Fear.
of irresponsibility. This, yeah, we'll definitely get into that
My dog
later.
ate it.
Yeah, that would not have flown.
At the end, it said the priests were accused, but did nobody go to jail for molestation of minors? It just said they were accused. Ain't nobody was in court. Like, bro, what? The church had lawyers on deck or something? Like, what the hell?
I haven't checked, but I think it's possible that they weren't, or maybe it took a while. Like,
Like,
and
it.
cases like this keep coming up, like in the years since. So,
You
like,
think it would have, like. You saw how they did that information scroll thing at the end, like every based on a true story movie does. Like,
mhm.
this happened, nobody was harmed in the making of. Well, they don't say that normally, but, like, it said so and so number priests were accused, and then it didn't say anybody about anything about anybody being sentenced or going to jail. Like, these people were just like, hey, you touch kids. He was like, well, I did. Okay. Have a nice day. Like, what the hell happened there?
I would expect maybe some were sentenced or arrested, whatever, but I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. Maybe I should look that up
Where's the
while we're doing this.
facts,
But
Evan? Give me the car facts, Evan. The ending was good with all those people coming forward. That was really cool. That was a really cool ending. Really good way to end it. Like, it's definitely not gonna be a sequel or anything. But, like, it was
well, I don't know,
oh, Jesus Christ.
because well, no, for real. Like Mike Resendiz is in real life is still kind of looking into this stuff. I heard an interview with him like a month ago,
I'm gonna
just
call it
randomly.
Spotlight 2 light bright lighter? What lighter bright? What?
No, but well, because he does. I don't think any of the people in this work for it anymore. But like Mike Resendiz in real life is still looking into this stuff. He had like
Good
an
on him.
article that he did like a month ago about like the church getting bailout money for COVID because like they were able to apply as a small business or something. I don't know exactly what the
Really?
point of it
The
was.
church, a small business?
Well, I think what happened with it is, and maybe I should link to the article. I'd have to go find it again. But I think it's something about how because each parish is kind of considered its own thing, like they can
Oh,
kind of
God.
say
Okay.
they're all individual small
Yeah.
businesses,
Mm-hmm.
and like there's something about their money they're getting bailed out with being used to like pay victims and like pay their settlements. And I don't know whether that's supposed to be bad or something, like that they're not supposed to be doing that ethically or whatever, but I know Mike Resendiz just did an article about that, like literally within the past 2 months.
All right.
I don't know if that really gives any
Nope.
answer to that question, but it at least is,
Ending was good.
you know,
People calling, great. Perfect way to end it. And that's it. I put a thing down for later reactions, but I didn't have any later reactions. Like, I
okay.
didn't really think about the movie past what I wrote the day I saw it, which wasn't today for once. You told me to watch it in advance, so I did.
Yeah. Yeah, it deserves to have a couple days to sit on it. Like, that worked pretty perfectly for when we did Pirates 3, but not, I
Damn,
don't think that would
no,
have been good to do for
no,
this.
don't talk about Pirates and Spotlight in the same podcast, Evan. Episode
Probably shouldn't.
blasphemy.
A little bit. Yeah, so just before we get into our topics, like, just since this is based on a true story and like I have like a little bit of personal experience with this, and before anyone thinks about it, like this is not a victim story. It's just I have grown up Catholic. I live near Boston, at least. Well,
Rhode
I've
Island.
moved around, but my family's based in Boston, so I'm more familiar with there than like any other area. So like maybe that's a little bit of like bias for why I to say I like it is a little bit. I do like it, but I also kind of like get the vibe of it and the whole world of it a little more than I think some people would, just because of my like proximity to it. But as I was going back through this, I thought it was worth putting this in. Like, I have heard recently about priests that I know who like have broken celibacy, not with kids, like with other adults, and they're not abusive, but they fit the pattern of like, I think there's a stat in there. So I at least have some kind of.
Priests aren't supposed to do that.
They're not supposed to marry, and that's, I don't know how universal that is for Christianity, because I know like some pastors it's totally fine.
Oh, that's not the case. Well, at least the churches I've been to, almost all of them have wives.
Yeah, I don't know which denominations like allow that and which don't, but Roman Catholicism is absolutely like, if you are in religious life, you can be a deacon and be married, but that's not the same thing. I'm not the best person to tell you about it, but like the celibacy rule is hard and fast. Like, if you are a priest, you do not marry. And same goes for nuns, but that's not really, there's no focus on that for this. But and I don't know any nuns also. So
Would you say the amount of nuns you know is none?
yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to lighten the mood of that just a little bit. I know it's a serious topic. I'm sorry.
That's fine. So that list at the end, I like paused it and looked through it.
The places?
All the places, yeah. Like, my family has lived near several of the cities on that list. Not like in them necessarily, but within an hour. And like, this story came out when I was pretty little, but I did start wondering, like, how close was I to any priests? Like, do I know priests that were abusive, like, that I met in the past? Do I know kids that, like, I went to school with who were maybe abused? Nothing confirmed, but I did start to wonder about it. And, this investigation came to light, again, when I was, like, I think, like, 3 years old. So my entire time in school, people have been a little more aware of it, but even so, I don't mean to like scare people with that, but it is something I've been thinking about since going back to this. And also, like, my parents both grew up outside of Boston. That priest that they mentioned, like the first major case, Father Porter, he actually served, like, he used to work in the church that my dad went to as a kid. Not when my dad was there, but
like the real Father Porter?
The real Father Porter, yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, and like I remember, because I went and saw this in theaters with my dad, and on the way home he was like telling me about it, like, because he didn't grow up in Boston, but it was close enough, and like he didn't really know about it because he was, of course, pretty little when it was happening, and he wasn't there when Father Porter was. But like, I remember that really did make it feel kind of real to me. It is that many. And this, of course, is like a big thing that comes up in Catholicism in general now. And I don't think, as a lay person from Catholicism, like, not to say that there's not a bad reaction to it, but I think if you stay, you can't be blamed for that. If you leave, you can't be blamed for that. Like, I respect both choices, because in some ways, if you're not okay with like the hierarchy of the church and how they've acted through this, like, absolutely, I don't think anyone could judge you for not being okay with that and not feeling comfortable, like, bringing your kids to church after you find this out. Like, if anyone blames you for that, I think they're wrong. Like, also on the other side of it, like, I think it's also like fine for people to stay after they hear about it, because the church is not just priests, and like, it can be like a major source of hope for people, which is part of why this issue is so bad, because it kind of robs people of that. Right. But I think some people will ask, like, how could you leave just because of this? Or how could you stay in the church after you find this out? I think there are justifiable reasons for both. And they seem to kind of, all the journalists in this are like lapsed Catholics, but it doesn't go after like the church teachings, which is it's important to do, I think, because it's focusing on a very, like, I was kind of surprised when I first saw this that it didn't go after the church as much, because I was kind of expecting that. And of course, like, it doesn't paint the church in a very great light, but it's not being like anti-religion in any way, which I think is kind of an important thing to do. So let's get into our first topic here. So it's the world of the story, which is Boston Catholicism. So, we've talked about world building a little bit on the show, and this is not, of course, world building, but it is important to the story, I think, that they give a good sense of what the setting of Boston and its relationship to the church is like, because it's a pretty important thing that runs throughout it. Everyone in Boston that the people talk to are like sort of afraid of the church, and some people are like very willing to defend it. Like, it's one of the more Catholic cities in the country. Might even be the most. I don't know exact stats, but I know it's up there. Just from like watching this as someone who's not from Boston, or are you not Catholic?
No, I'm not Catholic.
Just as being not Catholic and being not from Boston, did you feel like lost on anything, or like did you get a good sense of it, you felt like?
I mean, I went to Catholic church one time because I had
Well, but I was asking, like, from what this movie showed, did you feel like you got a good sense of like what the world of the story was?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But I also went to Catholic church one time. I'm just going to say it wasn't for me.
Fair enough. Yeah, but I think it's an important thing for the movie to show, both for people in Boston, and of course the majority of the people watching this aren't going to be familiar with it. And there's a very strong sense of like, people in Boston do not speak ill of the church. We're kind of beaten over the head with that, but it is sort of important to beat us over the head with it, because it is giving that sense of like, if this story gets out, it's going to be bad for them. And, they give some examples from the past too, but also, they give the stat 53% of the readership of the Globe is Catholic. And we see several peripheral characters that are, and the victims in the scenes that they have those interviews, they talk about like, religion was really important. Like, the church was big in my family. And even like the reporters are all like, they all grew up Catholic. It's a big part of the city. Also, there's the sense that Boston functions a little more like a small town. There's a couple characters that note that, and I think they
portray it like a small town.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the only thing I see on the outside is the damn, like, everything else is taking place inside. You're inside the courthouse. You're inside the Globe itself, inside a restaurant. The only time I saw the outside was in the suburb-looking area with that one dude that lived down the street from the priest, the dude with the stash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, Boston's not it's a populated city, but geographically it's a very small city. And, it's very old, too.
Also not a crazy lot of people walking the street like New York, for example.
That might have been just a budget thing with them shooting.
No, I mean in real life, when I went to Boston, like, there ain't that many people out.
You haven't been to the same parts or the same times as I've been to Boston then.
Maybe there's two different Bostons than Evan. Maybe I went to Boston 1 and you went to Boston 2.
Maybe. It might have just been timing too, because I tend to go there when it's like good weather.
People went in like the winter
out.
So that also might have been a part of it. It was either fall or winter.
Yeah. Boston gets really cold in the winter. So yeah, that might have been part of it. So yeah, it's a very insider culture that they show, though. Like, they mention it, but they also show it. Like, there's many people that come up where some characters like, oh, I know that guy, like, personally. And I mean, from living in New England, I can tell you that is absolutely the experience. Like, everyone kind of knows everyone, which I don't know how true that is of other cities, but it's true up here.
Who are you?
In New England. Yeah, literally. Like, I'll meet, like, if you meet someone in Rhode Island, which, you know, this isn't Rhode Island, but it's close. Like, if you meet someone who lives there, they know someone you know. It might not come up immediately, but they absolutely know someone you know.
I don't know who you are. What is this?
Well, you're not from Rhode Island, so...
You don't know where I'm from. I'm from Earth, Evan. Get it right. Get right.
I mean, same, but that's... yeah. I think they also do a good job of portraying, like, Boston-type people. Like, it's kind of a rougher city, like, not necessarily in terms of, like, high crime rate or whatever. I don't know where it sits on that.
It wasn't the accents. They did not portray that. But...
It's better than some. It's not Matt Damon, but it's not Kevin Costner either. Kevin Costner does a terrible Boston accent in this one movie. I thought a couple of them were a little iffy. One of the victims I thought did probably the best one. The one that Resendiz talks to, Mark Ruffalo. I thought his was pretty good.
Yes.
But, like, some of the people in this just feel very Boston. And it's like...
In the car.
Yeah, in the car. Go
Harvard.
to Bar Harbor. Yeah. It's a stereotype, but it's a very real stereotype.
Park the car in Harvard Yard.
Yep. You will absolutely hear that sentence said just like that.
I had to say it at least once over the course of this podcast. There was no avoiding that.
Yeah, just wait until we get to Good Will Hunting, dude. Matt Damon's Boston accent. Oh, I love it.
It's good or bad?
Oh, it's great. I love Matt Damon doing a Boston accent is all you need to get me to a movie. He's not in more than like 3 movies where he does a Boston accent, but like I'll watch something because of that at face value.
Spider-Man 4 with Tobey Maguire and Matt Damon doing a Boston accent.
Oh my god. That would actually be an enjoyable thing.
I thought you were going to be torn.
I mean, I'm sure it would still be pretty bad, but if Matt Damon's in it doing a Boston, that'd work.
It's Tobey Maguire, Evan.
It's Tobey Maguire, but it's Matt Damon doing a Boston accent. I would pay to watch that.
Instead of James Franco playing Harry. He's Harry too or something.
Yeah. Matt Damon is a Spider-Man villain. Let's do it.
The Bostonian.
One other thing that, and this will come up a bit later too, but that was important, I think, to the world of the story is like how much people keep saying like the church does a lot of good here. But I think a counterpoint to that again, this will come up more later, like that's a very strong sentiment that runs throughout the city. But a question that I think has to get asked is how many victims does it take before that becomes an invalid excuse? And I don't really have an answer to that, but I think it absolutely passes that point. Like the scale that we see here, and like one incident, of course, is too small because that literally is the bad apple argument. But, you know, I don't know what that number is, but I think that's something that it's not mentioned. It's not even really implied at, but I think it's a question that eventually comes up. So that kind of leads us into the next topic, which is like how they expose the issue. And we'll talk a little bit about accuracy in this too. So what did you know? You may have already answered this, but what did you know about like the whole clergy abuse scandals prior to watching this? Whether like true or false things.
Just that it was happening, or it was supposedly happening, and I just believed it. It's been talked about in all sorts of media, TV shows, comedy TV shows like South Park and Family Guy. I've probably done stuff on it. I'm not going to specify anything, but stuff like that. It's mentioned in rap songs all the time, or any song talking about something profound, or even making a joke out of it. It might do that. It's pretty much like I've gotten knowledge from it all over, but nothing like that focused in on it.
Yeah, and it's a little too bad that like I mean, I guess it's kind of nothing to do about it, but like I wonder whether that was happening before this case happened, like before like this journalistic piece came out, because I don't know how many people knew about it and were like talking about it freely like that, even just like making a joke about it prior to this story coming to light. I mean, it's pretty clear that people knew about it, but like, were people talking about it? I don't know. I was just curious to hear that. I don't really remember what I knew about this issue before seeing it. I knew it was a thing. I don't remember from where. One thing I'll say, again, I can't speak to how it was talked about before, but I can say that, like, as someone who's gone through Catholic school, when it would come up in like religion classes, which didn't happen often, but they can't really ignore it anymore. So there's usually like a bit in religion books where they'll be like, yes, we are aware this happens. They don't deny that it happens, but they're like, the church is not okay with this. We do not condone it. I don't know whether I've heard that from, it's probably a mix of like religion books and religion teachers. I think that answer is both true and untrue, because it's absolutely true that like the church does not like condone any of this in terms of teachings. There's nothing in the Bible that justifies this at all, which kind of goes without saying, but like, it's not as if this is part of Catholic teaching. However, the church hierarchy, as is shown in this investigation, kind of does condone this. And there are people who can separate the two. So when someone says the church does not condone this, they aren't lying. Like, they are being accurate in some ways. However, there is an extent to which that isn't true.
Because they're, at the same time, they're protecting the priests? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so it depends on what... It really depends on when you say, does the church condone this? Who do you mean by the church? Do you mean, like, Catholicism's teachings? Because then the answer is no. Do you mean, like, the Pope, bishops, and all that? And the answer may not be yes across the board, but the people who the answer is yes for win out most of the time. So it's not as clean cut. And again, like, I think it's okay to be able to separate the two, and it's okay to not be able to separate the two. Just, it's kind of an individual thing. In terms of accuracy, I didn't do like a ton of research into this, but I watched some interviews with the real journalists about this, and they kind of confirmed that they're like, yeah, little bits of this are dramatized, but for the most part, like, it's pretty accurate. And I was kind of surprised at some of the things that they confirmed. I don't remember specifics, but I would have thought this was a little more dramatized than it was. But apparently it's pretty true to life. Even that ending scene, which comes off maybe as a little bit like more something you'd see in like a fictional movie, that's pretty accurate. Like, they got a lot of phone calls that first day. They were surprised that there weren't picketers, and they got tons of calls from victims like right away. So even though it might look I wouldn't have expected that was necessarily true. I would have expected that was sort of just nodding to the impact it had, but I think it's actually close to literally true. And also, like, the victims, I haven't looked into this exactly either, but I would expect that the victim characters in this are not like really real people. I would expect they're more like summary characters that are there to just kind of just summarize like what most victims' experience was. So it might, like, they're probably not based off of individual people that they talk to. It's just kind of like giving the sense of, this is the sort of like trauma that most victims went through. And I think that's a better decision than trying to be accurate. One, for privacy, and two, just because this is not really so much about accuracy as it is about informing people. I think it was a good decision. Going off of that too, like, I agree with you that I think they did a good job not sugarcoating the victims' stories. Like, they let the abuse speak for itself, but I think an equally important choice in that was that they also don't overdo it and make it too dramatic and like have people like bawling in those scenes. And also they show the victims as adults. Like, I think it would have been a more like, I think a more obvious idea is to like
Kept the kids.
Yeah, with kids. Like there are no kids in this movie.
You mean as far as like important characters? Because there was like the choir Mike was looking at, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. And but like I think the way that they include just like little peripheral kids in this is kind of brilliant because it's all you need. Like I think there's a scene like right after Sasha goes and talks to one of the priests, like the that she interviews, and like right after there's a couple kids that ride by on their bikes, and it's a tiny moment, but it does all it needs to. It's like, oh man, this is like the danger is right around the corner. And I think that those little moments are even more powerful than like any scene that would have nodded to that. I think is a really good choice for writing it. And also, again, like if they had a scene like showing a priest actually abusing a kid, I think one, that kind of throws off the tone of the movie. Two, I feel like that would just be sort of gratuitous. And three, which I think this is the most important thing, it doesn't give you the whole picture. The major thing that the interview scenes focus on is like how these people are still traumatized as adults, which you absolutely can't infer that from scenes where you're talking to kids about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that was a really good choice to do that, because it's showing like this is psychological, like intense psychological trauma that these people go through. And also, like, I think the score is kind of important in that too, because it might have been tempting to have like a really emotional, dramatic score under some of those interview scenes. And I don't think there's any score in those scenes. And what music we have is pretty low key. Like it's just kind of, it's background music. It's not like intense. It's not supposed to evoke emotion. And I think it would have been tempting in a lot of cases to try to do a little more with the score, and I'm really glad that they don't, because I think that would really lend the wrong tone to it. One other thing that I thought seemed pretty effective for exposing the issue was the structure of the story. Like a lot of the characters at the beginning are kind of like writing off the issue a little bit in a way that I think is kind of similar to some of the things people tend to think about with this. They're just like, oh, it's just a few priests. Look at how much good the church does. Is it everyone? No, it's just like a few people. And the whole progression of the investigation in this gradually breaks down all of those arguments. And I would think that's probably fairly accurate to the characters, like the real people involved in this. But in terms of like exposing this issue to the audience, I think it's absolutely important that they include those moments where people are kind of like saying that this is like people are being paranoid or whatever. Like you said, this is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you feel like you got pretty well educated by this. I absolutely feel that. For better or for worse, most of my knowledge about this issue comes from this movie, but it seems like they did a good job with like being accurate about it, whether in fact or just in telling you this is what this is about. So the next is kind of about like making it dramatic and I kind of want to say entertaining, like, because it's not like a fun movie to watch. It's just people sitting in rooms talking, but for a movie of people sitting in rooms talking, it's like very engaging. And before we get into that, like, I really want to applaud like their choice of designing principle for this, because it feels like there are just so many bad versions of this movie that they could have made. One would have been like the over-the-top HBO version where they really show like the graphicness of the abuse, which I really don't think would have been a good move. They could have had like a legal drama where it was more like them suing the church for the documents and that kind of thing. That doesn't feel like the right move. I think they could have also made like more of a feel-good version of this where it's like, yeah, we're gonna like beat the bad guys with this. One, I don't know that that's accurate. Two, and I think that's like the tempting version for them to make. Like that just feels like something that might have been a little bit more of an obvious choice, and making the journalist like more heroic. And I really appreciate that they didn't do that. They also could have done more focus on the church and made them like a bunch of mustache twirling villains. I think that would have been a tempting choice. Like, as it is, we see about 3 priests in this movie total, and I don't even know if all of them are even given names. And that's kind of remarkable considering that it's all about priests. And there's 2 other movies that I think are pretty similar to this that I just want to compare to. One is Doubt, which I just watched this past week, and I was really surprised about it because like that also it's fictional. It's about clergy abuse, but it's also very, very different in the way it's framed. So, and also like the context of it was kind of confusing to me because it takes place in the 60s. It was written in 2004 and came out in 2008. So that's written after this all, like the whole investigation came out, but before this movie was around. But it also takes place well before the investigation or any of like the smaller cases that they talk about in this came to light. So it was very odd watching it. But the whole thing that they do with it in that movie, like the word abuse, the word molestation, and like anything like that, those are never said, but there's like a subtext that runs through the whole thing. And it's not a bad movie, but I think that was just something that was made around the same issue before Spotlight came out. So I don't really know if there's a point I'm trying to make with that, but this is just a very different type of story. Like, even though they're about the same issue, they don't really play into each other that much, I guess. And the version of this that I am maybe most glad they didn't make is one that was more similar to The Post. Did you see that?
No. Is that Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep?
Yeah. And Tom Hanks's character in that is actually like the real life father to the John Slattery character in this, Ben Bradley and Ben Bradley Jr. Just a little fun fact there. But that was really like, I think they were trying to be Spotlight for like the Watergate issue, which All the President's Men already exists. I don't really know what they were trying to go for with that, but that was something that was trying to just be more like feel good and like, yeah, journalists are like great or whatever. And
didn't the Triangle tried to go see that movie, right?
That is when I saw it. I didn't know if you came to that.
Nope.
Yeah, well, you didn't miss much in terms of the actual movie, but I just am so glad they didn't make the Post version of this, where they try to make it a lot more like dramatic,
triumphant, and good versus evil.
Yeah, there's this really cheesy shot at the end of that where like Tom Hanks and Meryl Streep are like watching the presses run and being like, "We did a good job, didn't we?" And like that just, I mean, it grated on me in that it absolutely would have wrecked Spotlight if they made like a moment like that. I think that really was not the right move. And they do make it seem like these people are heroes, like these journalists in this, I think.
The ending made that clear.
Right, but they don't give them like a pat on the back moment. Like they won a Pulitzer for this, and that is not mentioned in the end title cards, which like I feel like any other version of this, they would have put that in there. Like they would have shown them getting the Pulitzer in like the, end title thing, not to discredit them, but I think it's really good that that's not what they focused on there. The focus is, this is not just Boston, this is happening in a town near you.
Closest state to me was New York, but I don't even recognize the town.
Philly's on the list. Sorry to tell you. I don't know if there's anything in Jersey on there.
2 hours away.
I mean, not trying to scare you, just it might be a little closer geographically than you think. There's a lot of cities on there.
Now I'm spooked.
So the next topic within this is exposition. So obviously this movie is like all exposition, which is usually the most boring part of any movie that you try to get through as quick as you can. But I think they did a lot of things right for doing the exposition of this. For one thing, they keep a lot of the exposition scenes pretty quick.
Did they?
I thought a lot of them, yes. And there's a good conflict to it also. Like, getting this information for them is really hard in a lot of cases. They're having to dig for sources, and that scene where Mike's at the courthouse trying to get the papers, like he has to spend like all night there or whatever. It's like it's a real hassle for them to get this stuff, which I think makes us more invested in it, because we're like, all right, come on, I want to find out this. Like, why are you putting it off? Which, I think is probably pretty true to their experience trying to find this stuff, but it also is good for us as the audience. And one of the most important things that this does, I think, is, almost every scene there's like new facts that come to light, but some of them are just kind of little things, and some of them are like holy shit facts. Like, I think the phrase holy shit is in the script in action lines like 12 times to kind of give a sense like everything else they just said is like still important, but not really. This is the big thing.
Yes.
And it really comes across in the performances. Like, there's a few moments where they're like, wait, is that can't be right. That's right. And
with the numbers.
mm-hmm,
the
numbers especially.
They were like 90. What do you mean 90?
Yeah. That scene, like, anytime I watch it, somehow, like, I'm still surprised by that whole thing. Like, just
here's that scene.
They're like
90. 90? They really mean 90?
Well, but like it's just such a big difference. I don't think it's necessarily the number 90 in that scene. It's that they know about 13. They're like, oh, 13 would be big, and it's 6 times bigger, which is insane. Yes. And the scale of it is a major thing with this too. Like, they start off looking at maybe 2 priests, and like that's all they're looking at first. Like, I don't think there's that much of a sense early on that there are more. There's a sense like, oh, the church hierarchy knew about this, let's look into that. But then all of a sudden they discover like, whoa, this runs way deeper. This guy Gagan is one of like 87 priests in Boston that we also need to tell people about. And
90.
Yeah.
90, Evan.
90. Some other good techniques, I think it does a subtly good job using the settings to give information. Like, there's the contrast between Stanley Tucci and Billy Crudup's office, so Garabedian and McLeish, those 2 characters. Like, one's really small and like he's swimming in boxes, and
humble.
The other one with Billy Crudup is like all glass, really nice, like marble floors and everything. And it's small. I didn't notice it the first time I saw it, but I think it does register that like the bad guys are winning and the good guys are being stopped here. I know it's maybe it's not really fair to say it that binary of a sense, but it sort of wants you to get that impression that like Mitch Garabedian is trying to really do his job and he's getting nowhere. He has no money, basically. And Billy Crudup is profiting off of like child abuse, basically, not directly, but pretty much. And he's living it up. So I thought that was a good technique. Also, this is something that I think is normally not a good exposition technique, but in this case it is. They say a lot of information twice when it's important. Like, they'll mention it in one scene and then they'll mention it in the next one. And in most like books and classes that I've taken, they'll tell you like, don't repeat information because the audience will get it. In this case, when the entire thing is information, you want to repeat the stuff that you want people to remember, especially because so much of it is going to go in one ear and out the other. So
is that why Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy was twice the length it needed to be?
Probably.
I'm sorry, I hated that movie. I hate that. I never fall asleep in class, and that was one of the only times in college that I did. I'm sorry. Side note.
No, that's a good comparison though. Like, because of course that's a very different kind of movie, but it is pretty much all like a guy searching around for
Talking.
facts,
It's
talking in
talking.
rooms.
It was one gunshot in the beginning and then one gunshot at the end. I was expecting a spy movie and I got a talking spy movie. I'm sorry.
I don't think it's an unfair comparison, like, because most of the time, just as a general writing technique, you don't want your characters just sitting in rooms talking.
That's what they teach us. That's what they teach. That's what they embedded in our brains, Evan.
Yep.
Show, don't tell. There should be more action than dialogue. All of that. All of that. And Evan.
And most of the time that's absolutely true. I think it was a good instinct. And there is showing in this movie. It's very subtle, but it's there. Like, one scene that I always notice that with is when they're finding the I can't remember what the books are called, but those books that have like the lists of priests and where they've been reassigned, and they're in that dark basement, and there's like they're like, where is that smell coming from? It is kind of subtle, kind of not, but it shows like this has been buried. Like, nobody comes down here, and this is where like one of their biggest findings is. The church has really tried to bury this.
That's your example of showing, not telling.
Yeah, and does that register with everyone? Maybe, maybe not. Like, maybe not consciously, but it's still a good tactic to use. Doesn't mean you have to do something like that with every scene, but I think it's a good writing lesson to take away from this. And also pacing. Like, I think this is just like impeccably paced.
Do you?
I really do. Like, one thing that I think often is sort of the key to pacing is like every scene's length should kind of be proportionate to how important it is. I think that's pretty much true in this. I haven't like gone and done math on it or whatever, but it feels that way. And you always kind of feel the momentum of the investigation. Like, for the first half hour, they're just kind of like plodding through it. They're like, oh, this is interesting. This is interesting. And then Phil Saviano comes in. He's the first victim they talk to. And they're like, oh, wow, this is like maybe bigger than we thought. Let's keep looking. But they still have some reservations. So they're like, all right, let's like, we're locked in, but like maybe we aren't going full steam ahead. And then they hear the 90. And after that scene, it's like full steam ahead for a little bit. And then 9/11 happens and everything stops. Like, I think the pacing of the scenes and how long they are does a really good job giving a sense of that. And like I said earlier, the way 9/11 stops everything, it's just kind of a feeling that I think you get as an audience member, but that is still giving you a sense of like, this is so much harder. And now, it's 9/11. Everyone is upset about it. Nobody wants to hear this kind of story right after that. And they mention that, but they also kind of subtly give you that feeling. And I don't think that's an accident. I think that is a writing technique. And I don't know if there's a lesson to take away from this, because, I mean, feel free to build or disagree with me on this, but pacing to me is just kind of an instinct. There's not really like, oh, people will say, don't make a scene longer than 3 minutes or whatever, but that's not always.
Oh yeah, that's all nonsense.
There's a truth to it.
There's no set scientific number for pacing scenes out. Like, you kind of just gotta feel it out. That's what run-throughs and edits are for. So
yeah, but it's an important thing, because you don't want to spend 10 minutes on something that isn't really that important.
Royale with cheese.
Oh god. Yeah, that's maybe a bit of a counterexample. But it's an important thing, and I think this movie does it really, really well. Another thing they do, which is more of a tactic that I think can be taken as less of an instinct and more of a rule to do, a lot of scenes will lead into each other when they can. Like, they'll end one scene and someone gets a phone call that leads into the next one, or is like, hey, you're going to talk to that guy, right? Yep. Okay. And again, that's not always a good thing to do in other things, because you don't necessarily have to set up like, oh, I'm going to go talk to this person. All right, great. Good luck talking to that guy. And then show them talking to it. A lot of times you can just show it. In this, I I think it's a good instinct when there's so many characters and so much information saying like, you know, when this is another like strategy that I think they use really well. They'll use a character's name right before they show up. Like when Mike is going to talk to Mitch Garabedian, they'll say something about Mitch Garabedian, and you're like, oh wait, who's that guy? And then it shows Stanley Tucci, and the next one is like, okay, right, that's who he is. Yeah, so those are just some good writing techniques that can be taken from this. Next thing, this shouldn't take too long, but I do want to talk for a minute about the characters. So this is absolutely not a character story, but we do get some like little moments with the characters, and they feel specific and like distinct from each other. And I really like that it hits each of them on a personal level. Matt has the rehab center right on his block, so like that really is kind of like it gives him stakes for this. And Sasha has her Catholic grandmother that she's kind of like, oh, when this comes out, it might get a little, she's not going to be happy about it. And Mike is kind of struggling with thinking maybe he would want to go back to the church someday. And now he's like, that is, I just can't. And they give a little time to that. And then Robbie, I thought, had the best personal stakes where we find out he actually buried the story years back when they got the it might have been the Porter case, it might have been a different one, but I like that they acknowledge that, both because it gives a fair shake to everyone involved, but it also, you know, it makes everyone feel a little more real.
They also never answered why he did that, but sure.
Well, and again, like, there's not really an answer to that. He says in that scene, like, yeah, I did it, I don't remember doing it, but I did, so I'm responsible for this in some ways. I'm going to put a pin in that for a sec, because that's going to come up a bit in the next topic. Just one last note with that, like, I think the performances really help. Like, if you'd made this with a bunch of nobody actors, I don't think we would have cared about any of the characters. I don't think we would have remembered everyone. Like, it does kind of help that you can just be like, there's the Stanley Tucci character. Like, being able to recognize the actors kind of does help. And also, like, they give good performances here. Not, like, stellar, but they're what they need to be. They're low-key in most places, and they're not distracting from it either way. They're not distracting from it by being too good at playing these characters and making them feel, like, too distinct, but they're also making them feel like real people, so they don't feel wooden.
Mark Ruffalo.
Mark Ruffalo is a little bit more quirky than he needs to be, I think. But yeah, I don't know how true that is to the real guy.
Mark Ruffalo's.
Okay, so, and this is where we're going to get back to that point you just brought up. So this is the last thing we're going to talk about, which is the theme of social responsibility. So the theme, in my eyes, is the line from Stanley Tucci: if it takes a village to raise a child, it takes a village to abuse one.
Yeah, that line was crazy.
Yeah. Well, do you agree with it?
Not entirely. I just thought it was cool to, like, reverse it. But looking back at it and, like, trying to analyze it, that doesn't make much sense, because all it takes is one person to abuse another person, to be honest. So.
Well.
Was he talking? I guess he was talking about, like, abusing. I don't know.
I'm hoping I can, like, kind of bring you around to it, because I think it really is proven by everything that this movie shows. I don't think I noticed that the first time I saw it. I really think it is the driving theme of this movie. So, which institution or, like, group do you feel like gets the most blame or is painted the worst in this, if any of them?
Institution?
Yeah. Like the church, the lawyers, the journalists. I don't think there's any others that would be in it. Or I guess regular people.
The church.
You think it actually paints the church the worst?
Out of all of them, yeah. They're the ones that got the people touching the kids.
I mean, fair enough. Like, I mean, of course it starts with them. Honestly, when I saw it the first time, I kind of felt like it was a little bit harsher to the lawyers than anyone else, which was surprising to me. Watching it this time, I kind of feel like it pretty much gives a fair shake to everyone. Like the first time you see it, I don't think it feels like the reporters get as many knocks in, but as I was looking at it, they do acknowledge a lot of times like, hey, we heard about this, we heard about that, we heard about this, and like Phil Saviano and a couple other people say like, why didn't you guys do anything? I sent you this stuff and you buried it, you know. Why did this not come up sooner?
Oh, that was a Snaps guy or a Snap guy.
You've asked it a couple times. Again, I don't think there's a good answer for why didn't this come out sooner, because, you know, like there are reasons, but not necessarily good ones. Like the point of the movie to me is not, and like I kind of went into it expecting it to be more like child abuse is terrible will be the point of the movie, and it's really not. It's more the point is like, how was this allowed to happen for as long as it did? Why didn't we notice sooner? And it pretty much points all of that out. It's like the lawyers covered everything up by saying like, you know, sign this NDA, whatever, and the church kind of acted like, you know, we'll take care of you, we'll get you a settlement maybe, but don't ruin this guy's reputation or the church's reputation. And the regular people all kind of went along with it. There's those few scenes where everyone's like, you can't talk about this kind of stuff in Boston. That just doesn't fly. And people are like, the church gave me pressure, like, don't say anything. My friends gave me pressure. Everyone basically is complicit in this. And I didn't get that sense the first time I saw it, but it is textually in the movie. So do they say that specifically? Yes and no. I still think it does a good job giving everyone a fair shake with this, even if the journalists are portrayed maybe a little bit nicely. But in defense of that choice, like, the journalists we see in this are doing good journalistic work. You know, they're not doing a smear campaign. They're not running a tabloid. They're doing a really good job. And another thing that I didn't really notice the first couple times I saw this, but I did this time, a major part of the conflict of this is that they need to get this story right. They can't just tell it. They have to tell it in a way that doesn't allow the church or the lawyers or anyone involved in covering this up to be able to write it off and say, it's just one or two of them, we didn't know about it. They're proving like, no, here's how we know you knew about it. Here's how we know there are so many people doing this and why it kept happening. And also, like, tied into that is that they can't let other papers get to this. They have to be very secretive about it. And like the Herald is maybe moving in near the end, and of course it is kind of the Herald's responsibility to also print this story, but that big loud, like the one kind of loud argument scene between Mike Resendiz and Robbie, they're both advocating a valid side of it, that, you know, we have to beat the Herald to this because if they mess it up, then we're screwed, and all the work that we've done is basically for nothing. And Robbie's saying, no, we don't have enough now. If we go now, they'll still be able to bury us. Maybe they just had that to be a dramatic scene in some ways, but it's an important thing. And I think part of the theme of this is also do your job well. It's weirdly like kind of a way to like do social good, is just do your job correctly. That kind of feels like a point of the movie to me. Like, the two people who are kind of at the moral center of this are Mitch Garabedian and Marty Baron, so Liev Schreiber and Stanley Tucci. Like, they're the people who are like most committed to like doing this correctly. And like, this kind of ties back to the world of the story thing, but there's those few scenes where Robbie's friends are kind of like trying to pressure him to like, come on, don't go forward with this. Like, this is like, you're just going to rock the boat. Look at how much good the church is doing. And I love that line that he says to one of his friends. He's like, "Oh, this is how it happens, isn't it? Like, someone leans on someone else and everyone just looks the other way." That I feel like is one of the most true lines in the movie. One other like kind of subtle thing with it is like I think it's kind of saying take victims and whistleblowers more seriously. It's not like screaming that. Garabedian and Saviano, the lawyer and the first victim they talk to, some of the reporters kind of write off both of those characters. They're like, "Oh, Garabedian's a crank, he's paranoid," and then like, "Oh, Phil Saviano's like so annoying, like he keeps coming at us, he's trying to start a holy war, whatever." And both of those characters turn out to be right about everything. And it doesn't give him like, "Oh, you were right" scene. Like it doesn't like throw it in our face, but textually it is there that like the people who they say are paranoid at the beginning turn out to be right. Um, did you have anything else for this?
Nope.
Okay. And this is the last bit, and then we'll be done with it. So, just to tie in with that theme, I don't usually get political on this show. I don't think I ever do. We never really talk much about issues outside of the movies or stories we do. I was planning to just do a regular analysis for this episode, but as I was revisiting this movie, there were a few things that I noticed that I couldn't really ignore, and I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't mention them. So, just to timestamp this, we're recording on August 1st, 2020. That may not end up being important, but maybe it will. Even though the content of this movie is just focused on the cover up of abuse by the church, I think this issue really is universal. There's so many elements of this that apply to other issues. Like, this speaks to things that have been brought to light by the Me Too movement, and especially it speaks to some of the stuff that's been coming up with police shootings and Black Lives Matter the past couple months. Like, the term bad apples shows up several times in this movie in reference to priests, and it's been showing up a lot in reference to police lately. And recently, I also learned that police officers involved in shooting innocent people get reassigned to new precincts, just like the abusive priests do. And there's elements that run through both institutions that allow these things to keep on happening. And there's protections in place for people who do bad things that let them keep happening and prevent people who are responsible from being held accountable. It's not just about bad individuals, it's about power structures. And a lot of people will talk about like how much good the church and law enforcement does, but again, at a certain point, we kind of have to start asking like, when does the bad outweigh the good? And as I said before, I don't know the answer to that, but in both cases, we're past that point now. So I see this movie really as a call to believe victims of abuse and violence. And it's not lost on me also that the victims of clergy abuse are predominantly white men, which probably factors into why this got media attention like about 10 years before Black Lives Matter and Me Too did, maybe with some change there. And in accordance with the It Takes a Village theme, I'm saying this as a reminder both to our listeners and just to myself. Like, when you see corruption, no matter who it affects or what it means for you, we should call it out, because if we don't, we're letting it grow. So, like, part of why this abuse went on for as long as it did is because the feelings of people who weren't affected were prioritized over the lives of victims, and that's absolutely still happening in other places. And I'll admit I'm guilty of that. Like, there have been times that I've seen things and I could have said something and didn't, not with clergy abuse or police brutality, but with other things. And we need to stop doing that and call out corruption when we see it and hold people accountable. A lot of the causes for things like this abuse scandal are institutional, but a major cause is regular people just looking the other way. So I felt like it was kind of my responsibility to draw these parallels to things that are a little more relevant and even stuff that maybe we don't know about yet, even though that's not normally what we do on this show. And, you know, if that makes you uncomfortable, I had a trigger warning at the start of this, so you were warned.
Suck it up.
Yeah. That's all. Jelani, if you want to add anything, feel free to, but no pressure.
Nah, you broke that down pretty well, bro. Black Lives Matter. I didn't really have anything else to add to that. You
Okay.
stole the show.
Yeah, I felt like I talked a
Okay.
lot in this. I gotta take a sip of water.
Hey, bro, you killed it. Killed it.
I don't know. I felt like just, we're all about analysis and finding comparisons
Yeah,
and
let's
like just
consider this analyzed.
yeah. It felt like we never really are. I don't feel like we're in a position to do socially responsible things with this, but I didn't want to pass it up. So anyway, so if you don't have anything to add to that, we'll go to the boilerplate. So next episode, we are doing Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 3. Pretty
The
excited for
finale,
that.
boy.
Yep. I got to start that. I
Circles
have
after
not
that.
started. Circle. I got to pick
Circles
my
the
next one,
circle.
too. I don't know what... I have an idea for it, but I don't know exactly, so I'm not going to announce it right now.
Do action.
Action? Okay. I'll pick...
Please do something.
I'll do
just
something a lot less
not
serious
depressing.
than this.
and serious
Yeah, I won't...
and real
I
life.
won't pick anything. Yep. Yeah, I'll pick something more fun.
You're gonna pick like a slave movie or something next, Evan?
No, I mean, you know me, Schindler's List, following this up. I don't really want to do Schindler's List.
Christ.
Yeah, in other news, this will have been true for a few weeks after this, but as we're recording this, our Star is Born video is up on YouTube. Go check it out. Our logo's by Kelsey Hendry. You can like us on
Shouts
Facebook,
out.
subscribe, rate, and leave reviews on iTunes. That helps people
Those
find
are
the show.
important. Yo, people don't realize how important reviews are. I didn't realize that till my book was out. But make sure you give this, take like 5 seconds and give it a review. Just be like, good or something.
Yeah, decent.
Like that.
The audience
Yeah,
applauded.
Jelani Kelly is a funny guy. You know, stuff like that.
Yeah, even even if you want to like
Put a
critique
period.
that I hate things too much, go ahead and put that in review.
Jelani doesn't take movies seriously.
You can follow us on Twitter at INTAnalysis18. You can follow me on Twitter at Davos Watson. And where can people find you?
I mean, I don't know why you would, but if you want to follow me on Twitter at Jelani T. Kelly, I'm there. I'm on Instagram at Base Phoenix, and I'm on Twitch occasionally now at JBase Phoenix.
Yeah, so if that's all, we will see you guys next episode.
Avatar.
Avatar.
No more molestation and
Yep.
religion. Bye.
Yep, no more of that.